At 11:15 is Fred Carl. Fred's the founder and executive director of the InfoAge Science Center here. He's going to give 20 minutes update about what changed here since last year, since you guys were here last, improvements to the museum, and then 20 minutes about the museum in general for those who haven't been here before or aren't familiar with it.
In Desert Storm 1, the Iraqi army thought that they were going to decimate American teenagers brought up, I think the quote was, on Coca-Cola and rock and roll, because the seasoned artillery crews from the Iran-Iraq war, how are you going to stop these guys with all this experience? They didn't know about Firefinder. And so that, as one captured Iraqi soldier was quoted to say, every time we used our artillery, it rained steel. Okay, so that's this place. Oh, there's our duck. Okay, we try to bring our message to people as far as we can, and there's one of the things, like one of the places we shop for information is eBay. There's a HO-17 electronic shelters that was made to go on a deuce and a half. And one day on eBay, we found the plans from Camp Evans Radar Laboratory. So there was no question, was that designed here or not anymore. So anyway, doing our best to get our message out. Okay. Our happy little duck. Okay. See this building here with the camouflage? We had no clue what this was, and this was going to be demolished because, as best we knew in our advanced state of masonry archaeology knowledge, we looked at these passing by in 30 seconds and said, that looks like cinder block. Cinder block, that's 1950s, 1960s. And then one day, a fellow named Ray Chase, who if you went into the museum, the radio museum yesterday, you met, he found a classified World War II manual that had a picture of this building, and I had pictures of this building labeled Camp Evans and had no clue that it was here. I just couldn't figure out why it was labeled because there was nothing like this. Well, there was a whole complex of buildings here, wooden, that were demolished. You can't see it here, but in the trees is the remains of one of those great big concrete 8-foot across anchors from the days the 400-foot Marconi antennas were here. Possibly the base is where the cursor was, going for 400 feet. So in the shadows of the Marconi days of level of communication, you had the World War II secret weapon of radar. They trained fellows on how to set these up, how to run them, how to troubleshoot them, how to shake out bugs, how to remount different kinds of antennas. And then in that manual was a picture of this site, and in the back of the picture you saw that Marconi antenna. And then about 6 photographs I had on file, just there they were placed. So that was one of those cool moments of amateur history discovery. We got a police escort for our duck. There's the old firehouse. It's the last of that type of structure in the continental United States. So that's another. The backup generator building, getting it primed. Okay. Our electrical switching building before we went to work on it. Issues, getting them resolved. But this is all stewardship. What would you do with something like this? Well, we have the top painted, and we got an estimate of $49,000 to paint the legs. So we're going to live with the ugly legs for a while. Okay.
What is it?
It was a, thank you, good question. As far as we've been told, I'll go back to it. Notice the roll-up door here, roll-up door there, roll-up there. There's one on the other side here. The roof even comes off. This was something to bounce lasers off of ships at sea, out to Earl, which is in this direction. Excuse me, no, not McGuire, the old dirigible base, Lakehurst, thank you. Lakehurst is that way, Earl is this way. They could do laser communication from this tower for military systems, and that's about as far as I know, okay? One of the things that did come out of here that came out a number of months ago is, remember the little red laser dot on the target in Iraq? and you saw it on the news, and then out of the sky drops the JDAM. That work started here in 1960s, and you who understand electronics, when the fellow came up with the reason, when the laser was invented, some folks joked it was the solution looking for a problem, okay? Well, there was a guy here, Mike Marachi, and we were fortunate enough to fet him in a dinner here. He found the problem, and it was an important problem. In a military battle situation, there's these guys called artillery spotters, and they go out in the field with a radio, at least it used to be a radio, and they call in and say, you know, enemy troop formation, tank, whatever, quarter mile, 2 miles away. And as soon as they click on the radio, the sophisticated enemy like the Soviets or third world nations supplied with Soviet radio locators would know where that guy was and would know it wasn't their radio. So they'd start shooting at that guy with artillery or mortars. Okay? So it used to be like as soon as you turned your radio on, you had 12 minutes to get out of Dodge or you were dead. Okay? Well, no one could detect a laser. A laser doesn't give off general radio waves like radio does. So that's what the fellow decided they could do, is get a laser to spot a target with these artillery guys, and they'd have a better life, right? And a less exciting work environment. The problem was it took 500 pounds of 1960s electronics. You weren't going to give that to a guy to put in his backpack, right? So they miniaturized 17 different types of components over a number of years. And that was the key thing. They got it down to 100 pounds. You need a hell of a big guy to take a 100-pound pack. Down to 35 pounds, down to 5 pounds, and eventually something you could integrate onto the binoculars of that artillery spotter, okay? And then they put things in like pulse coding so you could recognize which target from another target and which shell, so you could do multiple targets on one thing. All pretty cool stuff in a bunch of old World War II buildings, okay? And that's part of the reasons why we want to save them, okay? Another miscellaneous building, we got it painted and the roof recoated with silver tar, okay? Lots of buildings, that cylinder building again, inside of the building with gifts left by the contractors.
Does
Okay.
preserving the buildings or the equipment that you find, besides memorializing the project, does it sometimes help to fill in lost knowledge, like how this was done exactly?
No,
It doesn't do
it's
that.
because the documentation, a lot of the projects, the documentation was burnt or shredded.
Yeah.
Okay? What it does is if we get a clue or somebody walks in the door and says, hey, we did this here, you know, we then Google for that, and then we find out what it was.
Yeah.
Like one fellow came in and told us that when his dad was dying of cancer, he told him that he had worked on an electronic device here in World War II, and you were told at any time to improve it, simplify it, make it better, make it more rugged. He was given specific specs on this one, but he redid it and presented the person who was, because he was told what to do, he wasn't told what he was doing, okay? And he got reamed on this one for not following the specs. So he redid it and presented to them, and I don't care if you can do it better, this is what you were told to do it that way. After the war, he was told that was the trigger for the atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, okay? So I didn't know what to do with that little tidbit of information. I looked at Richard Rose's Making of the Atomic Bomb, but then one day it dawned on me, why don't I write Los Alamos? And I did, and they sent a PDF back with a couple sections of their technical history declassified in 1963, and there it said, the prototypes for the Archie system were secured from the Army Radar Laboratory. So no thank you notes, but boy, it sure dovetails nice. And since I'm an amateur historian, not a professional, I can do things like that,
Yeah.
okay? So where a professional would cringe, okay? More work on buildings, okay? More happy events. This gentleman is an expert in electronic warfare, and he was telling us some of, in a lecture, some of the ways that electronic warfare is done, okay? And it was pretty cool. You know, searching the spectrum for any wavelength the enemy might be using, you know, those kind of things, okay? It was cool stuff, cool stuff. All right, so enough family photos, enough with our trip to Camp Evans. Okay, I'm gonna run through this real quick just to impress you that any donations you make here, we are putting to the best use possible. And this is like Amazing Days because we're volunteers and we can do things like go down to Home Depot and buy the paint, buy the parts, and just do it. We don't have to advertise in the paper, do bids, have a lawyer review the bid specs, get proof that we've advertised it in the most appropriate venue, go and have the bid specs reviewed, you know, all that stuff that happens with a government project. We're just doing it. Those days will come, but the cool part is if you give us $1, we can get multiple value out of that as compared to a government project. So with the measly amount of money that we've gotten, here's the things we've gotten done. Okay, we won't, like the hotel you're in. When you walked from the lobby into this area here, you walked under this threshold. Notice the paint peeling off the walls. It really looked impressive. And notice the fungal infestation. Notice the front of the building was covered with bushes higher than the gutters. And so this is a list of things we've done here in this 17,000 square foot structure. And say that was, I can't do the math in my head, but just say $50 a square foot for reconstruction prices. If you can do the math in your head, that's the savings we've brought. And not little things like eliminate fungus, okay? Eliminate fungus, basement flooding. You're sitting in the rehabilitated dining room, et cetera, okay? Now we still need work. You know, we have broken roof issues to do. We have a leak on the piazza. We have a gift now to add air conditioning to this room and some ADA accommodation. So the building's usable, it's not perfect, okay? The cottages across the street, some of you have been in them. A similar thing. Notice the paint peeled off the wall and it was another fungus fest, okay? This is the cottage that, notice the fungus on the wall there. Okay? It was the biggest petri dish I ever saw, okay? Right? To get into this place, we literally went in with hazmat suits, pulled the boards off the windows, and for a number of weeks took leaf blowers and blew Clorox in a mist into the buildings to cut down the fungus infestation to the point where we felt safe enough to go in even with hazmat closing, okay? 9006, you know, we've re-roofed part of it. The problems we have with that is the Army in leaving ripped out the electric, ripped out the sewers, and ripped out the water supply. So we haven't been able to get over that one yet, okay? This is your building where the computer festival is ongoing right now. This is what we inherited. There was a hallway down there, again, another fungal fest. So, you know, hard work. Evan and Steve contributed to that mightily. This is the next area where Evan's exhibits are. Notice the paint peeling off the wall because there were pipe bursts in this. This is one where, thanks to a zealous attorney who was willing to go all the way to the Pentagon, the Army was forced to acknowledge and clean up. This building was filled with asbestos fibers because the asbestos coating on the pipes, when they burst, blew the asbestos all over. The Army wanted us to take it or they bulldoze it, and we got an attorney to go all the way to the Pentagon and make the case that had one of the undersecretary's knuckles that, yes, it was illegal to turn over historic structures in unsafe conditions. you know, they could destroy it, but it had to be turned over safe. So more shots of the building.
All the asbestos out as a result?
Yes, they did. Okay, and that was good because that was beyond our capability to handle. Yeah, because the word asbestos scares people. I went to the state and took a class. It was sure different than an IBM class on lead-based paint management, and I got the certificate and the card and the license, and I handled the lead-based paint stuff. And so that was one issue. That was maybe up to $1 million worth of savings if we had done it the government way. But luckily,
Basically got the government to pay for the bill and do it.
in a way, yeah, for the asbestos, yep. Because if it wasn't for their flagrant negligence and bad behavior, I'll put it nicely, there wouldn't have been an asbestos issue, and it would have been turned over in the good condition that it was, and we would have had the issue of maintaining the asbestos in good condition and doing an annual asbestos report, and then as we got money, we'd take it out little by little. Okay. Yes. So that's one thing the bad behavior saved us. Building after building. This is where you had the soldering class. Okay. This is the guard shack many of you have come through on weekends. Okay. That you could see the satellite building, the Tyros building. Okay. Oh, and all these buildings have new roofs, by the way, and most of them new heat and air conditioning. Okay, and this is where we are now. We're in a process called emergency stabilization, and we're busting our buns, getting everything we can do, handling emergencies and things like that. So, you know, and you know our goal, it's to get yellow buses filled with school groups here, honor those that contributed to saving democracy here, giving a place where we can have intergenerational influence, because every kid wants to learn stuff, even though, you know, some are jaded, and an opportunity for people and corporations to donate. The nice big enlarged checks are always fun to get. Question?
Get cooperation or help from anybody in the Army now? You might appreciate your saving a bit of military history.
Let me put it very blunt. For the most part, they don't give a shit. Okay, it's a new army.
I
Okay,
mean, it's just some individuals.
yeah, and so that's the reality of it. Okay, there are certain historians that are very appreciative of what we're doing, and we have a very good relationship with, but they can't give us funds.
Is that like
Okay.
your Office of Military History?
The military history office, I think we don't register on like their ability to see things, because part of it is they are professional, credentialed historians,
Yeah.
and we're a bunch of amateurs. Okay. So anyway, that's it for that. Now let's show you some of the history that we're attempting to save. Come on, let's go. Okay. Notice the antennas from the Marconi era, 400-foot babies. Then you have the antennas from World War II. Then the antennas from the space age era. And what you don't see is the antennas that you can hold in your hand, the antennas you could drag behind a submarine, the antennas you could bury underground. So one of the stories we haven't well expressed is the whole development of antenna technology here. You know, and it's not only the physical antennas, it's things like Edwin Armstrong coming here in 1913 and demonstrating to David Sarnoff of RCA fame his breakthrough circuit, the regenerative circuit that made your antennas perform better, right? And things like Roy Wengant of Canada coming here and doing static reduction. Because why didn't they have you know, FM radio to start back in 1914? Because the circuitry and the knowledge wouldn't support it. Why did they do dots and dashes and not voice and music? Because you couldn't do it. Sir?
Would there be anything underground that would be like cables or other things that they wouldn't necessarily know about without searching for it, or or
Yeah,
soldering or something?
there's lots of cables and stuff. One of the things we're hoping to find is the tunnels that they put underground for searching out Viet Cong during the Vietnam era using ground penetrating radar. It wasn't successful, but it did lead to University of Pennsylvania picking up the technology and perfecting ground penetrating radar. But there are plenty of cables. We could probably pay for re-roofing a building if we could get the copper cables out of the ground that are no longer in use. But, you know, it would probably be a lost leader. Okay. You know who we are. Okay. You know what our mission is. We want to inspire kids to learn stuff because, you know, you learn a lot from sitting in front of the TV, but there's nothing like seeing it in front of you in 3D and having a motivated, inspired volunteer or person who really cares about that version of a computer or that level of technology, explaining why it was important. And, you know, it's inspiring people as a human, three-dimensional or, you know, more dimensional game. Okay. This little recolorized thing is them celebrating in the backfield the end of World War II. All right. What's the challenge? Some of you may remember back to vacuum tube technology or component technology where you could influence your environment by changing things. Well, on most things you see a little tag that says no user serviceable components. How do you get a kid hooked on changing technology and learning science? Because science now and engineering has you know, a very complex language and its own customs and behavior, and as a X-year-old kid, it seems like a mountain. You got to get somebody to give you the confidence to be part of it. And not everybody has a dad who's an engineer, or an uncle who's an engineer, or a grandfather. So, and lots of kids out there have the talent, and not every kid can become a rock and roll star. Okay, so there's our little Einstein quote. Okay, a ton of history. It's the foundation of our effort here, and that's sort of like the our mock foundation, the footing, the different layers of block. Okay, this is the eye chart of our history, which is just a summary. Okay, some of the things we've done. What our goal is to have a funmuseum instead of just a museum, a place for people like yourself to contribute to science education, a memorial, historic preservation, and believe it or not, we do have archive and a library started. And we only do electrons, waves, and occasional photons, okay? We don't want to keep feeding frogs, polywogs, stuff that if the electric goes off, they run out of oxygen or freeze or whatever. We'll leave that to the biology people if they want to worry about it, okay? All right, the benefits: motivate, inspire, educate, preserve, okay? And most of these exhibits are made out of leftover stuff from corporations. The history, wireless days. This place was connected to Carnarvon, Wales, over nature's ether, okay? You know, the ether, where they got the name Ethernet, okay? When this place was built, there were certain people who thought there was ether carrying radio waves, okay? The place was the birthplace of the Naval Research Laboratory, okay? This gentleman here, A. Hoyt Taylor, he went on to invent radar in World War II for the Navy. So the fathers of both Army and Navy radar are connected with this site. And during the war, they had the British, Canadian, and as well as the Soviet radar scientists here. And then they brought the Germans. Here's the folks doing their work, getting messages from Europe, and then forwarding them on, okay, with the building down by the river. Notice the advanced switching technology, okay? These photos are on file at the Smithsonian, and they were kind enough to let us use it. The Clark collection started here by Mr. Clark when he must not have been keeping his wife, who was born in Florida, warm enough at night, and she went home to mother. So he had more time on his hand. Not every Marconi station ends in a happy story like we hope to be. Here's the other Marconi station in Franklin Township on Easton Avenue. Notice the pile of debris, okay? Here's the Marconi anchor that led to the realizing that that radar site was. And this station had an interlibrary system. A gentleman gave us 8 books from that library that when this station was closed in 1926, they rebuilt it, and with more ground, with less expense than it would have cost to expand here, because this area had become a summer resort, out in Riverhead, Long Island. So if any of you ever heard of RCA's Radio Central, this is where it came from. The equipment and the books in the library and the staff relocated from here to there, and this is 8 books that are stamped, what do you call it, Marconi Wireless Corporation of America, Belmar Library, okay? All right. Now, during the Depression and in between war years, things were brewing. This place was a college. Here's the students in one of the buildings. Here's the class of 1938 lined up in front of our building here. It was a college, and Fort Monmouth is trying every way, sound, radio waves, to detect a surprise enemy attack, because they saw in World War I that air power was the up-and-coming invention. Sea power, you couldn't do a surprise attack very well with battleships. People could spot them, and at the rate they could go, you know, they were often spotted. But planes were a different ball game, and they knew that planes were going to go from paper and balsa wood to something that was an effective military weapon. So, so here's what's happening during the war. Camp Evans was purchased in 1941. If I can find my cursor again, there we go. Here's the 2 Marconi cottages. Here's the building we're in. Here's the Marconi power station. Here's the last of the Marconi anchors that we can find. This was the row of 400-foot towers. Give it 1945. Here's mobile radar. Here's a radar tower. Here's a radar tower. Here's another one. There's one over here. Mobile radar over here. This place is a hotbed of radar research named after Colonel Paul Wesley Evans. Okay? All built with war bonds. The day the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, it was spotted by our first generation radar built by the team here and manufactured by Westinghouse. Okay? It was actually built at Fort Hancock on Sandy Hook. But by that time, the guys were in charge here. So the day the Japanese attacked, our first generation of radar was in production, and here's our second generation, the 584 prototype, worked with the breakthrough British cavity magnetron and the first prototype done by MIT, okay, the RAD lab, okay. If you were the Japanese and you could have World War II over again, the next thing they should have done after Pearl Harbor was sailed the fleet and had taken out the Panama Canal. And we knew it, so a few weeks after Pearl Harbor, they brought ships into the bay here, fitted them with Army radar because the Navy radar wasn't ready and there was jurisdiction issues, and they had a picket duty of ships sailing just outside of the land-based radar at both ends of Panama Canal. Because where do you think radar number 1 and radar number 2 went when they deployed them? At both ends of the Panama Canal. 3, 4, 5, etc. went to Pearl Harbor. Right. Some of the radar models they did here. Okay. Again, the fellow with the Panama Canal story. Okay. These are motivational things right in front of the building here. Okay. They brought in captured German equipment here during the war. Like, notice these trophy paintings. This German radar was connected with gun batteries. They had 8,000 of these Würzburg radars, and this one alone is responsible for taking down at least 10 Allied bombers, as best we could see. They captured one of these, brought it back here. They could get it working. It was machine gunned by the German crew before they were shot or captured. And they could get everything working except for one tube. They couldn't figure out how to repair what was left. They asked a guy named Alan B. Dumont of Dumont Radio. That was like asking Bill Gates to get your computer going. And He came down here, they handed him the remains in a little lunch bag. He went back to his laboratory in North Jersey, and a couple days later, he had a working replacement, okay? So this was up the street next to the Diana dish. This was the captured German radar. Here's V2s, that's another story. Okay, let's spin through. Some of the specialized radars done here. Portable radar. 2 guys could carry this in off a landing strip and a landing craft, and you could have, like on D-Day, they had radar coverage within 20 minutes of getting that landing boat in place. And you've had cover girls and cover this and cover that. Well, we had covered tubes, okay? So the 584 radar that decimated the V1s, okay, allowed our breakout at Anzio in Italy, and was used to protect us at D-Day, okay? That was the Diana site. Notice the radar there, okay? The idea was get it ready. And for our invasion of Japan, we knew, and the Japanese knew, that there were holes in our Navy radar that kamikazes could get through. They actually took Army radar, bolted it on barges, and were going to have Army radar brought out on barges with gun batteries on it to take out kamikazes who would exploit the blind spots in the naval radar. But thanks to the atomic bomb, that bloodbath was avoided, okay? And now the Japanese are our best allies. Again, the vacuum tubes, there was no transistors, and there's Tubey smashing the enemy, okay? It almost looks like he has a Russian or a World War I helmet on, but okay. This is your place, Camp Evans. Phenomenal developments, even ground-approached landing for planes. Okay, who did it? All kinds of people, men and women of all kind of races, and that's one of the happy stories here. Okay, this is 1944, 45, and not only do you have mixed race groups here, you know, except for the officers, it still was the 1940s, but the people will come in here and they'll give me their baby shower photos of when the people here did a baby shower or they had a going away party, and it's all mixed. It's like looking at 1980s or 90 photos, so it's a happy story. Okay, and where did they do it? In all kinds of laboratories here. Okay, right? Now the war's over, there's new threats. Joe McCarthy, where you had lunch yesterday, Tail Gunner Joe was in there, and there's a picture of him, okay? There he is at the front gate that you walked down this morning. Notice there was more security fence, okay? They chased Sputnik here. They actually had a space chamber to test satellites in the evacuation of space, okay? They built satellites here and under contract by RCA. There's Tyros, okay? They did nuclear research here, okay? They did stuff for Vietnam. You know, it's just tremendous, and you know what we're trying to do. And I thank you for being part of it and making a contributions. Many of you have, and bringing your expertise here. It's well appreciated. It's needed because what we're doing here is incredible. We've gone beyond anyone's expectations, even our own. And it's the old thing: how do you walk a million miles? It's 1 foot in front of the other. And we've gone a longer distance than we ever would have imagined. So, you know, look at here. Okay? Okay? Making it happen. That's what we're doing. A day at a time. And this was a particularly happy day when we got our first series of buses in. We must have ran 20 buses through the Diana site on one day as an example of what we can do once we get in here. So you know how you can help because you're helping. Okay? And I'd like to thank you very much.
Thanks, Fred. Great job. So the next talk.
Can I have one question?
Sure.
What was a Marconi anchor?
The towers were so tall that they'd get ice on them or wind effects, so they had to have 4 Roebling guy wire anchors, concrete blocks, to hold them from being ripped from their base from wind. Okay, if you ever go to Wellfleet, Massachusetts, you'll see photographs of the towers that were there that were destroyed in an ice and windstorm. Okay, they didn't want to repeat.